Hey friends, a lot of us love to display our quilts on walls, so I've got a really simple technique for adding a sleeve to the back of your quilt I'm going to share with you all today. Are you ready? Let's get started. Well, welcome back everybody. That is right. My name is Rob Appell. This is So Well from Stitchin Heaven right here on YouTube, and I am so blessed to see all of you on the other side of the camera for another really awesome focused lesson on a step in our quilt making journey together. Now, as I was saying, a lot of the quilts I make, I love to display on the wall. So today we're going to add a sleeve, a very simple sleeve, into the back of the quilt while we're adding on the binding so that it's there in case we need it. If you haven't already seen, please rewind back a couple of weeks. I just put out a video using another quilt that was called Cosmic Charlie, but nonetheless, it was all about how I do my binding by machine 100% start to finish. I start on the back and I go all the way around mitering the corners, and then I roll the binding to the front with that finished edge and I top stitch it down. So familiarize yourself with the technique because we're going to now insert the sleeve strip into that spot at the top of our binding on this quilt, which happens to be the Super 60 quilt. So at any rate, I know I'm jumping all around. It sounds like it, but I wanted to bring you up to speed. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so. Hit the like, leave us a comment, let us know how we're doing here. I have been really enjoying all of the positive feedback out there. So make sure you're leaving me a love note. This is awesome. Okay, so diving right into the lesson plan, I actually got so far ahead I started stitching the whole thing without you. I apologize, folks. I was just excited about sewing last night. So what I've done is I've created I keep wanting to call it the binding, but this is really the sleeve that's going to go in the binding. So first of all, let's talk mathematics, calculations. So this is going to finish roughly 2 inches short of the entire width of the quilt. So I have about 1 inch on either side to slide that pole in, hide whatever display unit I'm doing. So what you want to first do is calculate the width of the quilt, right? You're going from edge to edge because the sleeve is going to be hidden up in this top area, in the top binding. So, for example, I measured the entire distance. Because I want it finished 2 inches shorter, we're only going to cut it 1 inch shorter, because once we cut it, we are going to go ahead and double fold over and top stitch, basically, or finish off this edge so we have no raw edges in our sleeve. So this is what I did, and I actually started, as you can see, by pressing the sleeve strip. Boy, I'm going to struggle with that today. Pressing the sleeve strip in half so I know which my right sides were. Now the sleeve strip itself was made at 6.5 inches wide. Now that it's folded, I guess that makes it 3 1/4, and then we're going to lose 1/4 inch on both edges here as it goes up into the binding. There's the word I'm looking for. So let's get you back up to speed on this side. This is where I'd sewn too far, but I just unstitched it so I could show you how to do it. I now know this is my outside or my right side, so I'm going to open it up to the inside, and I'm just going to fold it, a nice light little fold over, and then a second fold with my fingers. And I like to kind of take a moment, and we're just going to press this with the iron to set that real nice and crisp. Through time, especially if you like to display your quilts at shows, or if you're part of a guild and whatnot, you'll probably have your quilt on display a lot. So there might be a lot of times where you're sliding rods in and out of this sleeve. This is what this is for. So you really want to make sure that these edges are finished off up here. Okay, so now I'm just going to come on over. I already have an edge guide set on my machine, and that was set because I've already kind of pre-started putting the binding on. So I don't want to move this edge guide. So I'm basically just dropping about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm sewing on the inside just so I can see what's happening, but I am now killing the entire raw edge of the short edges and doing this on both sides, obviously, to the project. Okay, so now that that has been done, I can fold it over, and if this is the first time you've ever done this, or if you have a pretty lightweight sewing machine, I will encourage you to take and stitch along the 2 raw edges with less than 1/4 inch seam allowance, just to basically baste these edges together. Now I'm using my new handy quilter. This is the HQ Stitch 510 machine. It's a single stitch machine. It's a very industrial style sewing machine. So it's going to handle all of these layers. So the 3 layers of the quilt, the 2 folds of the sleeve, and the 2 layers of the binding all at once. So as I approach the quilt top, not even sure if you can see. Here's a good idea. Let me just show you right here. You can see this is the back of the quilt, and I've already gone ahead and stitched on the binding like I was describing, or in the other video. I've already prepared for the mitered corners as needed up here, and we're ready to rock and roll. So as I come around, I have left, and my binding is still all rubber banded around so it doesn't fall loose. This is our top. This is our raw edge right along here. So the first thing you're going to really want to do, if this is brand new to you, is lay it out where you can see everything and position your raw edges of the sleeve strip along the raw edges of your quilt strip, and just confirm that you have this roughly or perfectly centered, depending on how you want to do it. And the easiest way to find center, folks, is just fold your quilt in half and then fold your sleeve in half and find your center point, okay? Now, like I said, if this is brand new to you, or if you have a pretty lightweight sewing machine, I'm going to strongly recommend we actually use some straight pins today. I don't use straight pins very often, but I'm going to today, at least in a couple of locations, to keep this from sliding. Now, when I go and pin, I'm going to pin up to the raw edge. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm keeping all of this binding strip. As a matter of fact, I might even want to do a few along this back edge right now. I want to make sure this doesn't get folded up and get caught inside of my binding while I am sewing the finishing. So I'm just going to set a few of these pins real quick. And as you become more proficient with this technique, you will probably find that you'll just grab it and go for it once you've found center. So you probably just pin your center. It's a good habit to get into slowing down. We love our quilting, right? So there's no reason to be in a rush, and doing it correctly. All right. So with that said, folks, let's go ahead and do a corner together as a quick refresher. And as I do this corner, we're going to go ahead and start sewing and catching in all of the raw edges. So with my binding strip, I have already stitched along the, we're going to call this right now the side edge. So I've stopped at a 1/4 inch back from this other edge. I'm going to fold my binding strip up, and I'm going to fold it back down. I'm going to check to make sure, and I know it's a little hard to see because it's black on black, folks, but that's my quilt, that's how I'm making it. But I'm checking to make sure this edge is square, the edges of my binding are square here, the edges of the binding and the quilt are square here, and all of this is going on. And now I'm going to gently move all of this into the sewing machine. And this is where a nice solid sewing machine comes in real nice and handy, lowering that 1/4 inch presser foot. And the machine's going to do the work for me, folks. So as I start to approach, I'm just making sure that my beginning edge of my sleeve that I just caught there is also underneath, right? It's all running right there nice along the edge. And I'm just going to pull that back to check on my quilt. And now I'm going to stitch this, adding the binding to the top of the quilt, securing the raw edges of the sleeve all at one time. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that real quick, and then I can show you our next steps. I'll be right back. Sorry folks, I guess I have a couple more tips I would like to point out. Please don't ever sew over any of your straight pins, right? That's just really, really dangerous. So if I get this coming in to frame here, you can see I'm going to remove my straight pin before it gets to the toe on my sewing foot. And then one of the things you may want to do is as you pull those pins, just like I was doing earlier, come back in and pin in the top edge now, or the finished edge of your sleeve strip down, because we're going to want those down now as we begin handling the rest of the quilt. Getting the rest of this strip on the back, you can see how smooth the new handy quilter is handling it. One of the things you may want to do, folks, is slightly lengthen your stitch length. If your machine is struggling with this many layers, I've often taught you all to shorten your stitch length because of bias and triangles and all of that. Maybe you're a 2 instead of a 2.5. So today you want to be up to a 2.5 or something like that. And then the other thing I'd like to point out, this is a great example right here. As I'm coming into this straight pin, you can see there's a fold starting to happen. So I'm going to pull the pins early as that happens to make sure, because remember that the quilt was kind of laying on the table. I want to make sure that everything goes in nice and straight and flat. I don't want to create any ripple or waffling along the top edge of my quilt. I don't want to create any rippling or waffling anywhere in my quilt. Sorry, let's make sure we're being clear today, folks. So right here you can see, here is the edge of that sleeve. I'm all but to the edge of the quilt, so I'm going to continue sewing off of the edge of the sleeve through the binding, and just like I had been doing before, I come down to where I'm at my 1/4 inch mark, I back stitch a little bit, cut my threads, and just like I was doing before with my corners, and again, I have a whole video, and that'll be at the end of today's video for you. If you need, there'll be a link. But again, I'm just going to fold up and down, align my edges, and then I'm going to start sewing down the last edge here of that binding strip. Starting at a 1/4 inch in, back stitch if you like. And then folks, you can also see right here, this is why I have done the calculations I have by cutting it 1 inch less than the width of the quilt itself, so that when it's done, it's basically 2 inches short, so that I have plenty of room to work here. I promise that last little inch of your quilt will not start to do weird folding or anything while it's on display at your wonderful quilt show or something. So I'm going to finish sewing these binding tails together real quick, and then we're going to come back in and talk about finishing our sleeve as well. Okay folks, so we are about ready to wrap up putting this sleeve on the back side of our quilt. And just as a reminder, I have the sleeve with its raw edges and everything totally finished now, pointing down, and you can still see I have these edges pinned so that it won't get up and in our way, because we're going to be sewing from the top of the quilt now. The binding has been put on, so all of my raw edges are here, and I've actually gone all the way around the quilt. So we're just going to finish this together as I come in over here and prepare for the corner. So my sleeve is sitting right here, and I've just got a few inches to go. I wanted to bring you back so you can kind of see. We're just going to always make sure that things are tidy and we have plenty of room to work. That's why we have that extra inch. And then as I come into the corner, again, and I demonstrate this better or in more depth with different colored fabrics, you can really see what's going on in that other binding a quilt 100% by machine tutorial. But just catching that miter right now as I come through. Once I know I have secured all of the layers, I'm going to rotate, and now I'm in the top, folks, right where that sleeve is, right? So it's right here, it's running here. So I'm just going to make sure that I go even a little extra slow right now. Tend to my threads and just roll that binding and just catch the edges. Again, if your machine was struggling at all, maybe you would want to use a walking foot. I was just recommending earlier you lengthen your stitches up a little bit, let the machine do the work. You can see I have the weight of the machine up in the air, the weight of the quilt up in the air, allowing the machine to just feed it through, going very nicely. And then we can just show you on this other side here real quick also. Okay, so now here we are seam. This is being caught. That's the bobbin thread there showing. So your effective sleeve now is probably about 2.5 inches worth. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to stitch that. And we can actually add a little bit of extra width for a wider rod if we needed to. But so yeah. Finish out the machine work, and then we're going to get into the hand work here in just a second. And folks, I'm sewing into my very last corner here. So again, just folding over the finished edges of my bindings. I should just be about clear now of my sleeve strip on the back. I'm going to rotate on that needle down function and finish out the top stitching of the binding here real quick. Come in, reverse, hit the thread cutter, all those wonderful things. Okay, now, oh, this is such a pretty quilt too. Let me just kind of slowly show you. Again, here we go. There's the sleeve. Here's the tube, if you will, right? So we can slide our finger in there, but there's also this space back here. So we don't want the sleeve to show above the quilt, right? So if we stop right here, when you hang this, your sleeve will show up and above your quilt. So we're gonna now sew by hand. And sorry, I know you have heard me say that I really consider hand a 4-letter word, but we do need to do it sometimes, folks. We do need to do it for labels and sleeves and things, so it's a skill we should have. So let me just kind of move this around real quick and show you how I like to address this. What I'm going to do now is I've got my cotton thread to match, and I'm going to say roughly 2, maybe 3 yards worth of thread. So it's already through the eye of the needle all the way over here. If you go much longer, it's just going to start to twist and tangle and all those things. I actually like to double loop my thread and pull it all through, so I really have a complete knot so my needle can't come off either. And then all we're going to do is we're going to come in underneath to start here. Let me show you how we're going to hide this. I like to start underneath, so I'm just going to go through just the quilt backing at the corner of where the binding would be. And I'm going to first come through, and then I'm going to pull my needle actually through my thread. So I've secured myself, I pull out any slack, so I've secured myself already into the quilt. And now I'm just going to kind of come up and I'm going to catch that very edge and into the quilt. And then I'm going to travel roughly, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch, somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4. I don't need a ton of thread here. And I'm just catching that edge as I go. And we're going to do this across the whole bottom edge, just kind of this whip stitch over and catch. And whip stitch over and catch. All the way through until our sleeve is completely secured, and then we're ready to hang up our quilts on the wall. And the other cool thing about this is you can still most certainly use this kind of a quilt on the bed because it's nice and soft and smooth, and this wouldn't get in the way if it was laying up under your neck or chin or something like that. So I'll just remind you real quick of a couple things, folks. Really consider putting a sleeve on before you address the binding of your quilt so that you can add it like we just did today. Secondly, reminding, my strip was cut at 6.5 inches wide to leave plenty of room now that I can actually slide a decent size rod from one of those standard quilt or photography style pop-up racks. Those are what a lot of folks use at quilt shows, or the wooden dowels. They will fit in here very nicely and won't cause too much swelling or puckering in the top edge. That happens if it gets too tight. And my last reminder is you want your sleeve to finish roughly 1 inch from either side. So start by cutting it 1 inch shorter than the entire width of the project. Double fold both those edges so you have no raw edges, and it will give you about 1 inch on both sides of your quilt. And that should give you everything you need to know to add a sleeve up into your binding. And again, if you didn't catch the binding video, you can hit it here in just a second. It's going to be on the end screen. Thanks for being here, folks. I love all of you, and stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.